Blog Talk Radio.
You're listening to author G.D. Grace's A Touch of Grace, Literary Magic, on Blog Talk Radio.
Medgar Wiley Evers, born July 2nd, 1925, was an African-American civil rights activist from Mississippi, involved in the courageous effort to overturn segregation at the University of Mississippi. After successfully completing an overseas military stint in World War II and finishing his secondary education, Evers became active in the civil rights movement, becoming a field secretary for the NAACP. Assassinated by Byron D. La Beckworth, a member of the White Citizens Council, on June 12, 1963, Evers was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. The trials after his horrific and untimely death triggered civil rights protests around the country and the world, as well as created creative works for us to reflect on as we move forward in time. A Touch of Grace honors the memory of the memory of Medgar Wiley Evers. He is a symbol of profound courage under insurmountable odds, and he paid the ultimate sacrifice for speaking up for equality. That information was taken from the website Wikipedia. Living in the shadows of addiction, you become desolate, a desolate soul, empty inside and void of hope. In the intense darkness, you wander aimlessly, driven by the insane obsession to get high, whenever, wherever, with whomever. Along that path, you run away from the beautiful person the higher power intended for you to be, and the wreckage of broken relationships are scattered along that trail of a soberless reality that your disease has placed you in. You are lost, you are alone, and feelings of despair are endless. But one day you reach out and another hand was there. You looked up and faced forgiving smiles of hope in the eyes of people you do not know. But something in their smile assures you you are in the right place, and this is where recovery begins. Listeners, I'm your host, GD. Welcome to the premiere of King on A Touch of Grace. Today's date is Friday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, and the time is 1:30 p.m. If you want to be a winner, you must dwell with winners. Authors Michael Charles Gibbons and Randy Rand Wilkerson are both my friends and brothers in recovery. We three found sobriety by the higher power's grace and have found freedom in recovery. Now, our stories might have different faces and places, but I assure you they are the same. Gibbons is the author of two inspiring books, one called The Dopeless Hopefiend and the other Words, and they are literary tales of possibility and freedom from addiction. Wilkerson, Coffee with God by Randy Rand Wilkerson, is a collection of inspirational ideas and thoughts, messages for the mind and the soul. And I am a 5-time self-published author, fiction writer, with 5 books on the market that deal with themes of relationships. We gather on the airwaves this afternoon to discuss our lives before, during, and after our battles with the demon of addiction. It is our sincere hope that if you are struggling with addiction or are experiencing mental episodes of the depressive kind, something touches you today that inspires you to find a new courage to walk away from slippery slopes and dark places. And I believe that the late Whitney Houston sang it best. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. And now, King. Michael, how are you doing these days?
Gigi, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on your show. It's good to be back.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. And what about you, Mr. Randy Rand? How's things going with you today?
I am rantastic, and happy Valentine's Day to everyone out there.
He's rantastic. That's great.
I like that, too. So we've got a big show today. We've got people that are listening in, and I want to wish you guys well when you communicate your stories to the masses. And, again, the theme is hope that we will instill in someone else. So the format for today's show is that we share our independent stories to keep from having a communication collision on the airwaves. So once one of us is finished, the baton is passed to the next person. So let's start off with Michael. Michael, tell us where your journey began, where addiction led you, and when you landed a spot in recovery.
Okay, well, my addiction began, it was many years ago. As I wrote in my first book, The Dopeless Hopefiend, I was a police officer in the city of Oakland for many years, and after I quit the job, after I resigned the position to do something else, I moved to New Orleans, back to New Orleans, where I'm from. Currently I live in Northern California, but I moved back to New Orleans to run a security company for a friend of mine who had started a security company. And while there, I made a decision that I wanted to give up the life that I had led and that it took me years to build, and I wanted to become a homeless dope fiend. So that was my end decision. So I had to make a few decisions. And it wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't a conscious decision. I've heard it said many times that an addict, that drugs are only a symptom of the addiction. The drug is not the addiction. The addiction is already in the person, So subconsciously I made decisions that I wanted to give up everything I had worked for all my life. And so I started doing small things, first of all. And the first thing I did, which was the biggest mistake in my life, I decided that I wanted to use crack. I wanted to go get me a hit of crack, just out of the blue. And I had never used drugs in my life. I had never made those decisions before. But just out of the blue, I said, I think I'm going to experiment with that. Based on nothing, just based on somebody introducing it to me. So that's the decision I made. So anyway, it took me from New Orleans. I gave up the job because I needed money right away, so I started a carpet cleaning business. I decided I wanted to go from house to house cleaning carpet because I didn't want to wait 2 weeks for a check. So I started doing these things, and one thing led to another, led me back to California. And, you said something in your intro, void of hope. I really enjoyed the piece that you wrote about that. That was truly inspirational. You said void of hope, and that's exactly what it was, because I've heard thousands of stories of addiction, and all of them are the same. And I think you also said that too. It's the same story of void of hope and just having no hope. And I think that's the main reason that I turned to drugs at the time. But what happened to me was, as I wrote in The Dopeless Hopefiend, that when you're out there on the street, you don't worry about taking care of your body. You don't care of taking care of anything else. The only thing that matters is that you wanted to get the drug. Drugs had taken me from, I decided to take myself because of drugs, from a place that I had money in the bank, I had a comfortable lifestyle, to the point where I was pushing a buggy, getting bottles and cans on the street when I got back to Oakland, hustling every day, trying to just get money to get drugs, ignoring things that was going on with my body is in high blood pressure. I have high blood pressure. And but I ignored all that because none of that mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered to me is that I wanted to get high, and that's what I did every day. That was the reason I woke up in the morning, and when I went to sleep at night, that's all I thought about was, where am I going to get a drug when I wake up in the morning? So as a result of me not taking care of my body, ignoring my high blood pressure, and my heart was overworked so much that it stopped. heart said, I'm not going to beat for you anymore. And heart made that decision. And I don't know if you ever experienced this, GD, but it's very difficult to live without a heart.
Yeah.
You don't want to try. Trust me, don't want to try. But anyway, my heart stopped, and I imagine somebody called 911, and I ended up in the hospital. And I was unconscious at the time, so I woke up several weeks later out of a coma with a scar on my chest because they operated on my chest to remove these hematomas that I had built up. My heart was so overworked that I had big bumps all over my chest that they had to crack me open and suck all those hematomas off my heart. So, and I crashed a couple of times on the table, and it's only by the grace of God that I'm able to sit up here and tell you my story, because I was almost not here, and I was in a coma for several weeks after that, and in the hospital several months after that, relearning to do some things that I took for granted all my life. So that's basically my story, and so that's what happened. And so now my life is very different. My life was very different. I'm grateful for a lot of things. I'm grateful for everything that's in my life and all the people that's in my life and today. And that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, if anyone is listening, and most certainly exactly that's what I say, the insane or the insanity behind addiction runs so deep that regardless of how we may be feeling, whatever our bodies are telling us, the obsession to get high just overrules all logic. And fortunately for you, though you crashed many times on the operating table, you actually awakened, and you truly did have an awakening. And that's where those 12 steps and those 12 traditions that we learn in the walls of AA teaches us to alter our thinking, so that we can maintain and sustain a decent life. So thank you for sharing that, Michael, and we're going to come back to you in a little bit.
And exactly, coincidentally, the first chapter of the Dopeless Hopefiend is called The Awakening. That's the name of the first chapter of the book, and that's the reason I named it that. And thank you. Thanks again for having me on the show, GD.
Oh, you're welcome. It's always a pleasure. This is your third time on the show, and you always bring a big crowd with you. So there are a lot of people who are out there. We understand what it means to support one another. I mean, in the walls of AA, I've met some of the most compassionate people, and most certainly we've known each other for a few years now. So I thank you for sharing that tale, and we're going to come back later a little bit so that you could read something from your book. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, sounds good. All right, so now, Randy Rand, tell us about your journey. You are too funny, Rantastic. So, where did your addiction lead you, and when did you find solace in recovery?
Well, it started off like this. When I was growing up, I heard the word alcoholic being used, but I had no idea that one day it would be used to describe who I am. And as I got older, I heard the word addict, and I had no idea that one day it would be used to describe what I am. My name is Randy Rand, and I'm an addict. And when I first realized about my disease, it was at a point where it started off like this. My disease came into my life, and it met me like a man meets a woman at the club, and it courted me, and it dated me, and it was like sending me flowers and serving me breakfast in bed. It was doing all of the things that it had to do just to get me in its grips. And as time progressed, it was very convincing to me that my disease was something that was going to be a part of my life, but I had no idea I had no idea the power behind it. And when I was, born and raised in Detroit, and we moved from Detroit to California, and when we moved to California in Sacramento, everybody knew everybody, but I didn't know anybody. So I wanted to be recognized. I wanted people to know who I was. I wanted the kids in school to know who I was. But this is where my disease really came into my life, because my disease told me that if you want to be somebody, you got to act like somebody else. And in order for me to do that, I needed to put a mind-altering substance in my body in order to be that somebody else. As time went on, things progressed to where, you know, I had to have the weed more often and the drink. In '79, I DJ'd my first garage/house party, you know, complete with the red light in the garage and, you know, stuff like that. And my payment was, you know, all of the beer I can drink and, you know, bags of weed or whatever. So this was my disease telling me it was okay, you know, because I wanted people to know who I was. You know, I had an identity crisis. And the whole time my disease is like applauding me because it's telling me I'm doing the right things. Because again, it was telling me if you want to be somebody, you have to act like somebody else. And the more and more I grew to fall in love with my disease, things started changing for me. And the things that started changing for me were the things that my mom and dad had raised me not to do. My morals had changed. My thoughts of myself had changed. Things like self-gratification became very important. I needed to satisfy myself and not, you know, not be the person my mom and dad wanted me to be. I became irresponsible. You know, everybody's schedule needs to work around mine. You know, I get to work 5 minutes before I'm supposed to be there. I'm up all night. The things that I was doing were all of the things that my disease wanted me to do, because it had me on a crash course. It was some time before I really started realizing what was going on. But one of the things that I do remember was this. Back when Richard Pryor caught himself on fire, I remember I was hanging out with my uncle back then. He was every family I think has got one of these uncles. But I'll never forget when I asked him, I said, how did Richard Pryor catch himself on fire? And he said, I can show you better than I can tell you. And it was on and cracking. You know, he showed me how to, you know, rock it up. He was showing me how to do these things, and it all involved around the world of crack. And so that became my drug of choice. But, you know, that was my primary drug of choice. That was my primary mind-altering substance. But everything else fell into place with that because my disease was telling me that's okay. My disease kept telling me these are the things that you want. These are the things that you're going to need. And as time went on, I got progressively worse, of course, because that's what the disease does. That's what it wants. I started stealing from my mom and dad. There was times I wasn't even allowed in my mom and dad's house without an escort. They knew what was going on, but, you know, like any loving parent, they had those stages of denial. No, that's not my son. We didn't raise him to do that. My sister, my brother, you know, it was, I had become that family member that was being loved from afar because my disease had patterned my life into a place where I had never dreamed. The things that I were doing were, you know, some of the unmentionable things that I was doing that most of us addicts, you know, we go through. But when the normie here's this, you know, here's the things that we share, sometimes it's like, wow, really? No, it's the truth. I remember one time hearing, like on a news, whatever it was, I was sitting up with my dad, and somebody in the documentary or whatever had said, yeah, I smoke crack every day. I've been smoking crack every day for like 2 years. And I was like, wow. So a couple years later, that was me, you know, nonstop, every day, without fail. I had to put some sort of mind-altering substance in my body because my disease was telling me this is what you need to do because this is what you want. I had managed at some point to finally realize that something's not right. But unfortunately, it wasn't quite my time. See, I went for a long time on non-speaking terms with God. I just felt no need to communicate with him, but it was only when I needed to communicate with him. The things that I did were, it's hard to explain without going into too much detail, but I can definitely say this. The things that I did were not based on the things that my mom and dad raised me to be. I wasn't a human being. Our disease, it tears us apart. It tears families apart. We see what it's doing to the world. I'm far past that situation now. Those scenarios, those temptations, my obsession, all of those things are gone. But I'm okay to talk about them now. I'm comfortable in my skin. My disease no longer possesses me. I'm possessed by God now. That doesn't sound right, but what I mean is this: is that I strive to redeem myself with God. That's the most important thing to me. That's how my life is. I have a daily dose of God because that's what keeps me alive.
I think that's fantastic, and I think that we can all agree that, that's one of the, I think it's the second step, and that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And most definitely, the insane existence was definitely portrayed very well when Mike spoke and then when you spoke. And then the progression of the disease and how bad it can get, the lies that we tell, what we avoid, the special moments that we miss because we're out chasing after a high, obsessing over just getting loaded. So a little bit of my story before I get into that, I want to thank you both for being courageous and telling your story. And the hopes this afternoon is that someone listening who is struggling with their addiction, whatever it is, being prescription medicine, may it be alcoholism, or may it even be the harmless one that they call harmless weed, because pretty much that's where I started at. I started late, considered late. I was 18 years old when I picked up that first joint. I was hanging around with some friends, and everybody, it seems, was doing it, And so I was somebody that didn't really like who I was. At a certain point in time in my life, I realized that I considered myself different when I was no different, but in my mind, that's where it led me. And so depression came to me at around 16 years old. And as a result of that, there have been 3 suicide attempts on my life, because I just couldn't stand who I was. There was an emptiness that I felt and harbored inside, and I don't know if I was too young or if I was not ready to face the fact that I had the genetic composition to actually be an addict. Nobody else could have ever told me that I would have been an addict addicted to anything at that stage in my life, because I was someone who always drew. I love music. I sang a lot. I started writing music. So, I pretty much started self-medicating and hanging around with other people that I wanted to fit in with, not thinking about hanging around people that just would like me for who I am without using. So late in my 20s and in my early 30s and into my 40s, I had pretty much lost my identity. I was hanging around a former pimp, who was, supplying me with what I needed. And hanging around with somebody like that, they're off in their own illness, So one thing that I know is that with this addiction thing, I learned that I didn't blame anybody else for the disease, But what I allowed to happen, I allowed myself to be verbally abused and belittled at the height of my using. I would do crazy stuff like bring over a 12-pack of beer, and then next thing you know, I'm purchasing the beer that I just bought because I'm hanging around a hustler. and who was very sick in their disease and didn't give a damn about me. And if I didn't give a damn about me, I didn't know how I was going to expect others to give a damn about me. And I didn't think I was hurting anybody else except for myself. I don't even know if I thought that I was hurting myself. I just believed that this was the way. So at the lowest point in my life, I had just lost about all of my material possessions. And again, I was caught up on this hamster wheel of hanging around with someone that was after my money, you know. But I played a very important role in that life I was leading, you know. And the saddest part for me is that it took me away from people who really cared about me. And so I guess my low happened when I woke up one day and I was homeless. And like Mike mentioned in the earlier introduction that I had, I was lost. There was a void that was missing. And at the time, I didn't know what that void was. I had attempted to go to rehab before, and I failed. And the reason I failed is because I kept hanging out with the same people. And it didn't help that I was living next door to someone that was, that was their job. They were, a drug dealer. And so little by little, I went back. But then when I came to this time, I immediately cut off all communication from people that I loved in order to really make sense of what was going on. So I divorced myself from the crowd of people that I hung out with. And then I was hospitalized and wound up going through a three-level intense recovery program. So I sought medical assistance for the severe case of the blues that I had been fighting over the years. And after a series of therapy discussions, I was, and I had to be clean before they could determine what was going on with me. So I was diagnosed bipolar 2. So now I am on medication that restored my peace and sanity. But while I was in the using stage, I did a whole bunch of things that could actually come up and bite me. So I know that I had never been arrested. I had never had a DUI. But those are the things that I had yet to experience because the road that I was traveling down was certainly leading me there. So I wound up having to take an HIV test, which came back negative. And at that particular point in time, I was ready to hear whatever the reality was of the life that I lived. And so when they came back negative, I'm like, my higher power is actually giving me another chance. So after years of darkness, I actually was led back into the walls of support groups where I'm meeting people all over the place, and I speak publicly about my experience to help others find their way because I know that the peace that I found and the serenity that I found, that's something that you have to give back. And I know that, and I thoroughly believe that caring for the mental is just as important as caring for the physical. And like Mike mentioned, a lot of the times the using part is just a symptom of a disease, and I found out that my disease, bipolar, I was prone to wanting to use uppers to try to keep myself out of that low. So thankfully, it's been a terrific past several months of where my life is right now and the people that I'm interacting with. And but then I also realize that there are people that are incapable of being brutally honest with themselves, and they're going to remain unhappy, bitter, and unpleasant, and they're unpleasant to be around, but they're also the slippery slopes. Those are the people that, they may not mean it. I think it could be like a subconscious thing, but they don't want to see you free. They don't want to see you happy, because misery loves company. And so I've accepted the serenity by changing the things in my life because I do know that there has to be a severe mental shift of the way you're thinking with anything. And that comes with a lot of therapy and a lot of sharing. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that. A lot of people don't want to get up. And I've heard people say, I don't know how you share, stuff with strangers. Well, you know what? Because those strangers understand me. They understand it because they've gone through it too. And so before we get into the next part of the interview, what I would like to do is I would like to read a poem that I wrote during one of my episodes where I actually tried to commit suicide by drinking a fifth of Jack Daniels and then also downing a bunch of pills. And I was ready to die. And I guess God, my higher power, wasn't ready for me to die, because when I woke up that day, I was still alive. And so then I just wrote this poem. And if you bear with me just a moment, I'm going to go ahead and read it. I call this Happy. This morning I heard you whispering in my ear, and I thought for a second that I might be hearing things, and I started feeling down and helpless, and I felt like crying because I couldn't understand how I got to this place again where I was doubting myself, and I thought about grabbing that liter of vodka, and I thought about scoring some of that dope, and I thought about downing some pills to ease the pain, and I looked outside and got depressed by all the rain, and I screamed out loud and started hitting things, and I stomped my feet and started feeling things, and I paced the floor and grabbed my head in agony, and I couldn't pull myself together, but I kept trying, and I looked up towards the sky and called out to God, and I dropped to my knees and begged for mercy, and I purged myself in a moment of prayer, and I allowed all the tears to flow, wiping them away, and I started to feel warmth inside of me again, and I looked outside and I saw that the clouds were dissipating, and I caught a glimpse of the sunny and blue, and I got up from my knees and smiled, and I staggered over to the door to open it, and I felt a cross breeze flowing past me, and I recognized just how much God loves me, and I got goosebumps all over my body, and I looked behind me and saw the image of pain just rotting away, and I felt relieved and renewed and energized, and I just want you to know how grateful I am for this life, and I know that if I ever need you, you'll always be there for me, and I cannot thank you enough for all the love you've shown me, and I know that if no one else loves me the way I need to be loved, that I will always have you, and I, yes, I am happy. Thank you for letting me read that to you guys.
Wow, GD, that's amazing. I love your writing, man. I love the way you write, and I've read many of your pieces that you post sometime, and it's just amazing. When I read your writing, I can read the effort. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold here. I can read the effort and sincerity and the heart that you put into the pieces that you write, because you're a beautiful writer. I love your stuff.
Oh, that was it. Oh man, that was the thing. Excuse me. The thing about it for us, we've talked to each other on the phone before, and we've heard each other's voices and things like that.
Right.
But when we post something on Facebook, let's face it, that's where we all have come from right now in our lives with each other's on Facebook, and we obviously have become people that things that inspire people on Facebook. The things that we do, we put spiritual things, we put the positive things on Facebook that people effectively will, they'll let us know that, hey, you said something that meant a lot. And when I call him Grandmaster G, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who don't know, I call Glenn GD, I call him Grandmaster G, and I call Michael Mr. Mike. So when the three of us, when we put things on Facebook, our intentions are to inspire people, because what you guys don't know is that you inspire us more than you say we inspire you. The inspiration comes from poems like that, and the thing about it is this: what people are now, they are now able to put a voice with the words that we put on Facebook, and that's a beautiful thing. The media has put us together where Facebook is negative. Everything on the planet is going to have a negative side, but it's up to us to take that and put a positive to it. So that poem right there, and and I keep hearing that and I, and it's like every time you said it, I felt it.
Great.
I became part of that.
As a matter of fact, I felt it so much. I was going to. I had picked out a piece I was going to read out of my book Words, but I said, "Man, how can I follow that?" Oh, I just closed the book and go to show.
Well, don't put yourself down.
Do that. We want to hear from you too, man. I didn't really know that I was going to get so emotional with it, and
right.
I guess it's because I felt safe, I felt loved, and I know that we are as sick as our secrets. So if I was going to do it, I had to do it just that way. And so now that you mention your books, Michael, what I would like to do, thanks for everybody for letting me read the poem Happy. It's posted on my blog. Tell us about your books, Michael, and thank you guys for being my friend. I just love you guys to death. How you went about getting them published. Can you tell us about the Dopeless Hopefiend first, and tell us what readers can expect and where it is right now?
Okay. Excuse me. Well, yeah, actually I have two books out. One is the Dopeless Hopefiend, and you don't know how many times I've had people walk up to me and say, "Mike, you're that hopeless dope fiend guy." No, it's not the hopeless dope fiend. It's the Dopeless Hopefiend. It's kind of you say, "Oh yeah, you're that hopeless dope fiend." Yeah, that's me. I'm the hopeless dope fiend. But yeah, the Dopeless Hopefiend is actually autobiographical. It's my story, basically. And I was listening to your story, GD, and Randy's story, and I was thinking that I said these guys are telling my story. No matter how many stories I listen to or lives, explanations of histories and drug abuse and alcohol abuse, they're all the same. I could pick out some things in your story that are identical to mine. And the same thing with you, Randy. I could pick out things that happened to you, like you were talking about some humiliation. And I remember, excuse me, I remember many times that I was out there and I started committing crimes. And I remember I came from a police officer background. I was a cop in Oakland for 10 years. And then the first time I was arrested for running into somebody's store and taking their stuff, I remember I was arrested by someone that used to be my partner. We used to ride around in the same police car all the time, that sort of thing. So, but we put ourselves through all these agonizing experiences because we're not driven by our minds. We're driven by that self-will that's all I want to do is go out and get high. Nothing else really matters. So
exactly.
Anyway, back to the books. The Dopeless Hopefiend is biographical. It tells my story, but when I wrote it, when I came with the idea of writing the Dopeless Hopefiend, I was laying in intensive care right after my surgery, right after I came out of the coma that I had been in for 6 weeks. I came up, I said, God, look, I don't want to live this life anymore. I don't want to live this life anymore. I'm tired. I know that you have more in store for my life, so I need to do something to get myself out of this pit of hell that I decided to put myself in. And I want to inspire others to not make the mistakes that I made and not make the decisions that I made that put me in this place in the first place. So that's when I came up with the idea, laying in intensive care, singing praise and worship songs. And the nurses kept trying to shut me up. They didn't want me to sing because I have a very bad singing voice. But so I was singing, and I came up with the idea, as soon as I get out of here, as soon as I get out of this hospital, I'm going to sit at that computer, and I'm going to write a book to inspire others to not put themselves in this position, or if you put yourself in this position, they give you a way out. The Dopeless Hopefiend opens up with a story that I didn't write this. It was inspired by something else that some anonymous person had written, but it talks about, and many people in recovery will recognize the story of you're in this hole, and a preacher comes by, and you say, "Sir, I'm in this hole. I can't get out." And the preacher writes out a prayer, and he throws it down in a hole. Then a doctor walks by, and the addict says, Doctor, I'm in this hole. Can you help me? And the doctor writes out a prescription, and he throws it down in a hole. Then a recovering addict walks by, and the man looks up and says, Mr. Man in recovery, I'm in this hole. I can't get out. And the recovering addict says, it's okay. I've been down in that hole before. I know the way out. Follow me. This is after the addict jumps in a hole. The recovering addict jumps in a hole, and the addict says, now we're both stuck. We'll never get out of here. Right? Then the recovering addict says, it's okay. I've been down in this hole before. Just follow me. So that was the impetus behind writing the Dopeless Hopefiend, to let it be a tool, to allow it to be a tool that other addicts can use based on learning things from my experiences and the solutions I found, God-given solutions I found for my experiences in the book, by reading it and say, hey, that guy went through the same thing that I went through. And if he could do it, I can do it. So that's why the Dopeless Hopefiend was written. And hopefully I've accomplished that by writing the book. My second book is called Words. And Words is a collection of short stories and poetry that I have written. And there's a couple of sections on there on recovery-related pieces that I've written. So both of the books, I think, are inspiring, and at least I hope they can inspire someone to change their lives, and that's why I wrote them. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's great, and I know that you are touching lives. I know that there's an anonymous page on Facebook where we all visit and we all share, and everybody's telling their stories and sharing and getting it out. And the one thing about the disease of addiction, though it does not get the fanfare that cancer or diabetes gets, it is a disease, and the reason it is a disease is because it can be terminal. You know, it is something that is very cunning and baffling, and it wants you. It's waiting around every corner. You know, there are people out there that start off with weed, youngsters that start off smoking weed, that think that it's a harmless type of thing. But one thing about addiction and using any type of substance and putting it in your body, I learned that you retard your growth. So if you started smoking weed at 12 years old, you know, you're still conducting yourself like you are 12 years old. And that's why, you know, when we run into people who don't know how to communicate with other people, when you run into people who have an issue just accepting life on life's terms and just and being that, is because they have retarded their growth because of the substances that they're putting in their body. And I know that, and I'm going to get off my soapbox in just a second, because I want people that are listening to this to understand that, and because it's so promoted. When I look at commercials on television, I see them promoting alcohol, and they make it seem like it is such a harmless thing. But the one thing that very few stories will tell is the post after all of those drinks every day. You know, if you're drinking every day and you're getting high every day, guess what? Houston, we got a problem. So I thank you for that, Michael, and I know that you're touching people's lives. And so what I want to do is I want to move into Mr. Randy Rand, and I want him to tell us about his Coffee with God, because he does always make these posts on Facebook, like you mentioned. So I want him to tell us about how that came about and the messages that you have and what you hope people will walk away from.
Thank you. When I got into recovery, you know, you hear about all of the things that just the promises and the things like that, the things that are going to happen to you. it was a slow process, but what I did was I learned to develop a stronger faith in God because, things were, I would say, not miraculously happening, but like, for instance, here's an example. There was a bill that needed to be paid, and it was down to like the last hour. And then all of a sudden, some money came out of nowhere through a family member or through a friend. Those are one of those little things that kept adding up to me, not just necessarily in a financial way, but in a spiritual way. He was showing himself. He was revealing himself to me. It took me a couple of years to finally get a job, and I wasn't much of a coffee drinker, but my roommate was a coffee drinker, but I wasn't much. I drink, coffee about once or twice a week. But I started this new job. My shift started at 7 o'clock, and I was up at 3:30. And I remember going to make some coffee because I was telling myself, I'm going to need this. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't fall asleep till 11. The excitement of a new job. Yeah, I finally got a new job. And when I was sitting there in a half-lit room on the couch, and I was drinking coffee, and I was thanking God. It's the first time that I had actually really felt in a spiritual way to thank God. And what I did was I shared that on Facebook. I had one of those little, they're prehistoric cell phones, not the big block ones, but the kind that have the numbers where you got to punch in the letters. And I was only allowed like 250 characters. And it was a short one. And when I put it on there, because I can't see that well, and let me explain that. This is the reason why on Facebook, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, because I have a little bit of a vision problem. And so in order for me to be able to do this, I started out doing it in caps with my little 250. That's the reason why I short text words like you are instead of the word your, Y-O-U-R, just to explain that so people don't get upset, because every once in a while I get somebody on Facebook like, well, why do you talk like this and that? It's because I guess that's my signature. But for the most part, what I did was I got that message across that morning. The next morning I got up and I put another one up there, and I didn't realize it at the time that it was just a thought. I had no idea where these messages were coming from that I was sharing on Facebook. I had never been able to, I don't know. I had never been able to talk like that about God in a relationship that I was developing. And it was at a point where I realized that I wasn't hearing God's voice in my head. I was hearing his voice in my heart. And I was able to put that and share it with people. I did that for like 2 or 3 days. And then the next morning I got up and I went to work. And when I got home, I checked my Facebook and I had all these messages like, just because you didn't go to work today doesn't mean that I didn't get up this morning looking for coffee with God. You need to put this on every morning. And so it went from there. And when I got to a certain point where I was, writing something every morning and I was posting it, I got more responses. I was getting more and more people that were looking forward to me putting that on there. That inspired me. And that's what I mean by the people that inspire us, because it lets us, it somehow, it gives me a confirmation that I made the right decision to turn my will and my life over to God. So as time went on, there was a lady from overseas who suggested you ought to create a page. And that's what I did. I created the page, Coffee with God by Randy Rand, and that was on December 18, 2012. And ever since then, I've posted in different groups on Facebook. And the thing about it for me is that I didn't see what was about to happen, but somebody said, you need to write a book. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll think about it. And then people kept telling me that. So I went on to look into getting a publisher, and I'm thinking, wow, this is going to be a lot of work. And I had no idea. Like I said, I had no idea what was about to happen. So I contacted a publisher. They wanted this money and everything. And I was like, okay, I was able to put down a little sizable amount. And then all of a sudden, my job went slow. there was no work, so I wasn't able to, continue making those payments. So here we go. Spiritual awakening. Here's the life changer in my life. Mr. Mike comes on, and he goes, "So, Rand, what's going on with the book?" So I went on to explain to him, and he led me in the right direction. And he led me in the right direction because had I not had him as a friend, had God not put him in my life, I would not have been able to publish those 2 books. He guided me to a publishing company that allowed me to publish my own creative works. And Mr. Mike, you have no idea, man. You have no idea how much you mean to me for that. So
thank you.
When I was able to finally put my feet back on the ground, because I was like sitting up on the table, I was afraid to walk again, so to speak, because I was like, okay, I'm feeling this defeat. What it was is a reality for me. It was another spiritual awakening. What it made me realize is this, is that in my life, God makes things happen and God allows things to happen. And when he makes things happen, that's when he's teaching me. And when he allows things to happen, that's when he wants me to learn. And what he allowed me to do was he experienced something that might seem like an obstacle that I had turned into a mountain, but it was only a speed bump in the road that he has paid for me. So when I was able to finally publish that first book, I learned a lot. And so when the second book came out, the tools that I had picked up from, publishing the first one, my second book became productively better. The amount of support that I got for it was, overwhelming. There had been times where I was just sitting up there reading all of my messages and all of these things, and it brought me to tears because, I had looked at the people that God had put in my life, and Mr. Mike, if it wasn't for him, like I said, I can't say that enough, man. I owe you. You guided me there, and that's because God put you in a place in my life at the right time. Whatever time it was that all of a sudden he pops on my Facebook and asks me what's going on with the book and then guided me in the right direction. That right there, I know that there are life changers, and you guys are definitely my life changers.
Well, brother, you don't owe me, because whatever debt you had to pay, you paid it many times over by the lives you affected and the lives you influenced by writing that book, because I haven't read it yet, but from what I understand, it's a very powerful piece of work. I think many times wow, excuse me, folks, my voice is... Anyway, I think many times...
Do I got Mr. Mike all choked up?
When we go through things, we have experiences, we don't want to... many times people don't want to help other people to get to the same place, and this example is publishing a book. Because, see, I had to go through those trial and error where I had to meticulously go through and make all the mistakes and that sort of thing. So it would have been, sometimes it's too easy for people to say, no, I'm not going to tell you my secrets because I had to go through this. Now you have to go through this, and you're going to have to fight through the same obstacles. No, I mean, that's not the way God, in my opinion, that's not the way God wants us to live. He wants us to be in a position to help each other get to whatever place in life that we desire to go, rather than being an obstacle in other people's lives. So that's how I try to live my life, by treating people the way that I would want to be treated. So, but I'm glad you got your books published, Randy. I still have to get a copy of it.
I know that.
So might I
the thing about it is,
moment. Hey, Randy, this
I didn't do it.
GD. All right, so this is the thing. First of all, I just love what you guys are telling each other and saying to each other, and I know that there's a lot of compassion there. And for whoever is out there, it's when we become selfless that the blessings from God come our way. I believe in our addiction, we were very selfish, and therefore we couldn't see anything beyond of what we wanted. So the books that you guys have out, we're going to find out where the people can get them who are listening so that they can go ahead and support the effort and add a little light to their soul. So what I wanted to do right now, I wanted to go ahead and give some thoughts about today. Our differences are colorful and creative. We are reflections of the Almighty's power and love, and that power is something we must hold on to during dismal times. There is no step-by-step narrative that tells us exactly who we are supposed to be on a human level. The quest for joy is one where personal discoveries shape, define, and refine our character as we get older. Being on the outside of our lives is never a place to be, nor were we designed to isolate and bottle up our feelings without sharing them with one another. Caring for others who care for us isn't easy at times, but through prayer and meditation, we can find our absolute balance, the balance that allows us to have compassion for others while caring for others. This show today is being broadcasted to show how addiction can ravage the soul, to show it is very much a disease, but it also sheds light on the need for us to seek help for our mental as well. And so I want to go ahead, and I'll get back to you two in just a moment. If you know someone who is struggling with addiction or depression, or if you yourself are having consecutive blue days, it is a red flag. Do something about it. If you look around and you don't see anybody around you, there's something going on with you. So even if you're not using, street drugs, and you are on prescription medicine, or if you are just a weed head and there's nothing going on as far as a terminal illness, you need to find out why that is happening. So I went on ahead and got some numbers. There's a suicide hotline. It's 1-800-SUICIDE, and that can be used in the U.S., the U.K., and Canada, as well as Singapore. And then I also have alcohol and drug abuse hotlines. I got two, the National Association for Children of Alcoholics, because the disease does affect the people we love, the closest ones to us, and sometimes often that is children. If you're a child and you're dealing with a family member that has a problem, the number to call is 1-888-554-2627. And then, of course, the National Drug Abuse Hotline is 1-662-4357. So, Randy, I want you to tell the listeners today where they can buy your book.
My book is available at Amazon. It's also available. It's not actually on the shelves of Barnes & Noble, but if you go in there, they will order it for you, or you can actually order it, from Amazon. Those of you that are listening that are on Facebook, you can go to my Coffee with God page, and there's links on there. But otherwise, all you have to do is, Google Amazon and go on there and then put the title of my book, Coffee with God by Randy Randy, Expanded Edition, and it's available there.
All right, thank you. And what about the Dopeless Hopefiend and Words, Michael? Where can listeners purchase your book?
Basically the same places, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Books A Million, and dozens of other online booksellers. If you go to my page, my author Michael Charles Gibbons page, or Words page, we have links on there. And, shoot me a friend request, too. I mean, I could get maybe about 20 more friends, because Facebook allows, 5,000 friends. I think I have 1,982 or something like that. So, on my page, there are links, too, and it's I think, most places on my page is public. So, the pictures of the books are also on my on the page too. But Amazon is probably the best place to get the books, and that's it.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, I'm going to come back to you guys because I want some final thoughts. So while I'm giving this next little spiel of GD, think about what final thoughts you want to leave for the listeners today. And so we celebrate those who understand they needed help and got it. Praying for those who are unwilling to admit that they have a problem. Hopefully, we have helped unlocked and inner courage in you to step out on faith and participate in the building and the rebuilding of a better you. And remember, we are as sick as our secrets. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to you, Mike. What final words of wisdom would you like to leave listeners with today?
Well, I just want people that may still have a foot in that hole that I talked about that's in my book, or maybe you have both feet in the hole. Maybe you're sitting on the couch relaxing inside the hole that you're in, that you have dug yourself, that there's always hope. There are always solutions. Stevie Wonder wrote the song, "Problems Have Solutions." Mm-hmm. And it's been my experience. It's been my experience that all problems, every problem that we've ever had, we found a solution to. If we hadn't found a solution, we wouldn't be here. I like to read one short thing that's in my book, Words. It's called The Dancing Bear, and that's a piece that I wrote when I was thinking about the whole that drugs, alcohol, and other addictions. You know, because there's so many. There's drugs, alcohol, gambling, anxiety. I mean, everything is an illness now. So, and there are ways to get out of that hole. And anyway, the short piece is called "The Dancing Bear." It's been said that when dancing with a bear, the bear decides when the dance is over. Well, the bear that I boogied with for many years was a bear of addiction. This grizzly had 2 left feet and had a bad attitude. Whether we swing dance or while she did the funky chicken on my chest, she always led. In fact, she led me nearly to my death. I thought that it was fun at first. After all, she was a fairly attractive bear, and she felt good. She promised me that this would be the best dance of my life. She told me that I'd never want to dance with another bear. She lied to me. So for years, she dragged my silly ass around the dance floor, and I was powerless to do anything about it. I surrendered. I prayed. God listened. God answered. It wasn't easy at first. She really, really, really loved to dance. We fought and fought until we couldn't fight anymore. You see, when fighting a bear, you don't quit when you're tired. You quit when the bear is tired. Now I live my life bear-free, completely free of all bears, and it's only by God's grace that I live. Thank you again for having me on the show, GD. These hours go by too fast.
Yeah, they do go by fast. I remember when I was just had to go down to the 30-minute, but I invested in the hour and more because sometimes, 30 minutes just isn't enough. And what I want to do is I want to thank you, Michael, for being the decent human being you became, who you have always been, who you are walking in the light of now. And so what I want to do is I want to go ahead and go over to Randy. Randy, what are your final thoughts? What messages would you like to leave today? And you have the platform.
Okay. I am I'm working on 2 books, but what I'm going to do is read from my first book. The 2 books I'm working on a book for DJ Pizzo, who was a DJ for Too Short, and he's 40. And I'm working on his book, and I'm also working on another book. But from my Coffee with God book, this is one of my inspirations. God doesn't give me things because I deserve them. God doesn't give me things because I think I have earned them. He blesses me with things because he loves me. God said there were people in your past who took you where they wanted you to be. Today there are people who will tell you where you should be. Follow me, son, and I will where you need to be. And the only time you should look down at someone is when you're helping them up. This is part of the book that I'm working on, and it's about the disease from the diseaser's perspective. This is it starts off, baby, here I am. You have to let me go. You have to stop taking care of me. You can't keep supporting my efforts to continue digging the hole I'm digging. You have your hands on the shovel as much as I do. I can't dig as fast if you're not helping me. Maybe if you stop helping me, I may get tired enough to stop and rest. Maybe if I stop and rest one time, it may be the one time that I stop for good. But I need to tell you, if you keep helping me to dig, it could be the one of those times that you help me to dig the hole and I won't be able to get out anymore. Sometimes when I get locked up, it allows me to take the time to rest, but it doesn't mean my disease is resting. It doesn't mean that when I get out, I will be all well and wonderful. I love it when you're there for me. I love it because I know I can always depend on you. But I need to tell you, my disease loves it when you're there too. I need to tell you that my disease loves you as much as I do because it knows it can depend on you when no one else will. You have to. You have to. I have an anchor tied to my heart, and it won't allow me to let go of the things I need to let go of. I have an anchor tied around your heart as well, and it's connected to every piece of spirit, every memory, every moment of unrest or happiness. I have an anchor attached to the both of us, and it will survive and possibly get me back to shore, but one of us has to let go. What I'm telling you is that you have to do things now to not leave me, but to go and get your life back in order. I know you will always be there for me, but at some point, you have to know that right now we can't survive together. I need to learn how to swim again. I have to learn how to breathe again. I have to learn how to live life on life's terms. I'm going to tell you something that I can't say, but it's deep in my heart, and I know it's there. What I need to tell you is that I know that you have to go on without me. Maybe not forever, but for now. My disease doesn't want me to tell you these things because my disease needs you more than I do. That's someone talking to their significant other. That side that we don't really get to hear, those words that we never really get to say because our disease does not allow us to say that. That's from the book that I'm working on now.
Groovy. That was groovy. I like that.
Yeah. Yes, I really do like that, and I want to thank you both for taking time to stop by A Touch of Grace and christen the segment of the show called Kings. I said to myself that I was not going to premiere Kings until I had two of my good friends with me, and most certainly anybody who has listened to today's broadcast and who goes back and listens to it, understand, please listen to your gut feeling. If you're blue and you're blue every day, if you notice that people aren't coming around you anymore, there's got to be a problem. There's got to be a problem. I urge you, if you're using substances to dim the pain, if you are drinking every single day, there's a problem, okay? And my friends put it so eloquently today that addiction is a disease. Mental illness is a disease. The depression hotline, one more time, is 1-800-SUICIDE. That's SUICIDE. Alcohol and drug abuse numbers, National Association for Children of Alcoholics, 1-888-554-2627. And then the National Drug Abuse Hotline is 1-800-662-HELP. Do get help. Don't wallow around in self-pity. Do step up into the light of you. Walk in your own truth. And fellas, would you like to share with me the Serenity Prayer as we're going out?
Yes, sir.
Randy? Michael?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
All right, let's go ahead and say the Serenity Prayer to end the show. God,
many of us have said,
grant me serenity
to accept the things that I cannot change.
and change
first
things,
to change the things I can, and
wisdom to know the difference.
And I will
right.
keep coming back. Thank you very much, GD.
All right, and thank you, fellas, for being on the show. Everyone, A Touch of Grace is going 30,000 strong. We have had some fabulous episodes. This one here is one for the heart and the soul and the mind. We love you, if nobody else says that today, and happy Valentine's Day. Take care.
Love you guys.